Welcome back in, everybody. It's our weekly NBA show right here on Clubhouse TV with my partner in crime, Chris Farley. Follow him at FarleyBets. I'm Ben Wilson. As always, we're presented to you by sportsbet.io, and we are rolling right along here, Chris. NBA Cup time. I was awfully fortunate, man. I had the Rockets money line the other night and did not deserve to win, needless to say. But hey, sometimes you will never complain about the lucky wins, and as a result of that, we also try not to complain about the bad beats. They tend to even themselves out over time. Good week for us as we start off. A recap of last week, we had a joint best bet. You talk about lucky. Grizzlies were down 3, and Ja Morant got ejected from that game, Chris. And I'm like, well,
yeah.
that was a fun ride. I guess here comes the regression. And then somehow they end up covering by a hook. They win by 5, 4.5 point favorites against the Kings. I'm still not sure how that worked out, but we both hit that one. So a 2-1 week for us, 19-7 now on the season. So we'll try to keep the good times rolling. And it's been an eventful week for you, Chris, when you go out and you win a circa quarterly football contest prize. So I'm sure your life has been a little bit upside down and hectic here. But off the top, I know you had some either I don't know if it's grievances or positive things to talk about, but a lot happening here in the last week of the NBA, especially as it'll lead us into our discussion on the NBA Cup semis for this weekend.
Yeah, I appreciate the props about Circa. I will be in Vegas this weekend to collect. So excited!
Yeah, cashed it to pick up there, big guy.
Yeah, that's right. I gotta claim the prize. Bring in the wife, so it should be a good time. Yeah, I just wanted to get this started with a little bit of an opening rant because if you're feeling like the NBA product is a bit wild right now, and I know we've talked about that a lot on the show already, but in my experience, December has been just a very interesting month. Let me just go over a few things that have been happening. Saturday, Denver loses straight up to the Wizards. Jokic has 56 points in that. Now, Aaron Gordon was out. Jamal Murray has been sitting out a few games. Fine. But losing to the Wizards, that was very strange. Sunday, on a road back-to-back, Denver goes and they beat a Hawks team that has been on fire. They beat them by 30. Fine. Same thing happening with poor teams, right? Utah beats Portland on Friday by 42. They turn around on Sunday and they lose by 44 to Sacramento. Minnesota, who's been on a tear, 4 straight wins last week, they lose to Golden State, who lost 6 out of their last 7 leading into that game. The point is, things are very weird, and they're very weird in December, I would say, more than any other month. And I'll be completely transparent as a handicapper in the NBA now for the past 4 years, professionally on the public scene. December has usually been my worst month. And I think that's because at this point, 24, 25 games into the season, we have actually a pretty good sample size now, right? Like we know who these teams are at least trying to be, or mostly who they are. And from what I notice, a lot of teams are doing this shtick where they're saying, okay, well, let's try one more thing, or let's try this thing again one more time, even though it's not really working. And at this point, I try to categorize teams in 5 different ways. We have teams that haven't changed much, and we know who they are, like Boston, Cleveland, OKC, teams that have been experimenting, and it's mostly gone right. I look at a team like Atlanta, a team like Dallas, teams that are experimenting, mostly gone wrong. Now I'm looking at Golden State. We can talk more about them for the NBA Cup, but I'm including them in that. The Knicks as well, NBA Cup, just kind of showed that. The Phoenix Suns, we could talk more about them. And then there are teams that have been experimenting and it's gone brilliantly well. Memphis looks fantastic. Orlando is still progressing their 2.0 version of themselves. And then, of course, experimenting and it's gone terribly wrong, like Charlotte, Utah, teams like that. So we're going to get to a better place and we're going to know who these teams are very soon. I think we do at this point. And, January has been one of my best months historically in the NBA because that's when I think that things just start to settle. So if you're out there feeling like, how the hell do I predict these NBA games every week? I understand, and it's a great time to be extra judicious. We talked about that a lot on the show, but we will probably have more plays leading into January. It's just the state of affairs right now.
Chris Farley, you're a pro bettor. You're a circa quarterly contest champ. You also are a bettor's therapist. You can add on to your laundry list resume as well. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like NFL, week 6 through 9 historically, like, and this year especially. Like, I just got my teeth kicked in. Because at that point you have enough data, right? It's a quarter of the year. You feel like you know who the teams are, but then people always love to say how, like, an NFL season is divided up into 4 quadrants. And as the season goes on, weird stuff starts to happen, situational oddities pile up, injuries, bye weeks, what have you. NBA, not to say it's a total apples to apples comparison, but we feel like we know these teams. We have a good sample size statistically, and then the weird stuff starts happening. Injuries pile up. You get these no-show results that are impossible really to foresee coming. And it's at least why, for me, as we get into some of the NBA Cup discussion, I love that we have this cup simply from the handicapping perspective of understanding motivation is very easy to figure out from that end. It just takes one more wrinkle out of the equation. Now, that doesn't mean every game is going to play out like you would think. I mean, the Knicks-Hawks game was, 237 on the total the other night? Knicks big favorites. They lose the game outright. Game stays under by 30 points. But it wasn't like it was just a no-show Knicks not trying performance. I mean, they shot like 26% from three, and that'll happen when you don't have a good shooting night and you're facing another team that wants it, playoff sort of atmosphere. Those things will happen. So that's why, for me, I found like the Cup, as much as I got really lucky on my last bet, which was the Rockets, it is a little bit easier to decipher, and you can look at some more specific angles and matchup stuff on that. And as we'll get into it, we've had lines now come out. They are fully formed. The market's here across all sports books for Saturday semifinals. That's where I find myself the most excited, whether it's a pregame angle, as we'll talk about in a second, or even an in-game angle as these games start to play out.
Yeah, the NBA Cup. But let me just say really quickly, I don't know if you got just lucky. I was on the Houston money line last night too. 4 out of 5 of those last Golden State possessions were turnover. I mean, they were, and that, and that's because of that Houston defense, right?
Yeah.
Golden State had a chance to make that into 8-10 point lead in the final 2 minutes, and they just couldn't do it. So, there's definitely some kinks in the armor there for Golden State. I know a lot of people liked Golden State to win the Cup overall, but I think a team like Golden State, we're starting to see this experiment that I talked very highly of to start the season, and I really believed in. But now it seems like Golden State needs another guy. We're hearing these whispers about Jimmy Butler. I think that would be a great fit, actually. But like they need just another dependable veteran in there, right? Because it's just a lot of these young guys who are good, who hit shots here and there, who play pretty good defense here and there. But God, Steve Kerr is still keeping them on the court too much, Ben. It's really interesting. But we'll talk about the teams that won,
right.
And heading into Saturday. Atlanta Hawks against your Milwaukee Bucks, Ben. I really like this Atlanta team. I really do. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. And a point that I wanted to make before too is in these games where motivation is even, like everybody really wants to win, like the playoffs or the NBA Cup, defense, like defensive stats and metrics, in my opinion, don't matter as much, right? Everybody tends to play better defense at times like that. So it really matters who has the better offense and the better chemistry. And I think second half was pretty clunky, but Trae Young, who Quinn Snyder has built this team around, is such a great playmaker. It reminds me of kind of, Iverson, like sometimes with the ball, the way that he moves around, certainly Kyrie, and obviously a great scorer too. But they have a lot of guys now. DeAndre Hunter played great. Jalen Johnson is playing fantastic. I mean, he's a 20-10-5 guy, future all-star probably, right? Dyson Daniels, shut down defender who kind of makes up for Trae Young's lack of defensive prowess. So they have a team that just makes sense. And Milwaukee actually is very similar to Atlanta, I think, in a lot of ways, except they have Giannis, right? So they probably should dominate this game just because of Giannis, because I think Trae Young and Damian Lillard kind of cancel each other out. But I think the Bucks are really missing Drew Holiday, especially obviously on the defensive end, right? Because they just don't have that same exterior or perimeter defense on a game-to-game basis, and they can kind of save themselves now as they all come together. Brook Lopez is playing better. Chris Middleton has been on the court, but I'm going to look to support Atlanta in this one probably, and I think Trae Young really shines in these pressure moments. We've seen it before in the playoffs. We saw it at Madison Square Garden. So I'll just leave you with that, Ben. I know the Bucks are your team, so we'd love to hear from you. What you think?
They go back to the House of Horrors, which is T-Mobile Arena, where the Bucks are the only team of these 4 in the NBA Cup semifinals who were at this stage last year in the inaugural season of the tournament. I was there. I went to support my Bucks in person, and it all came crashing down. It was sort of the start of the end of the Adrian Griffin regime. He ultimately gets fired midseason. Doc Rivers comes in. But it's interesting, some of the quotes too. Bobby Portis was quoted after the game against Orlando saying, our record might be way worse now than it was at this time last year, but we like where we're at least heading into the semifinals. Having said all that, as the Bucks are anywhere from 3 to 3.5 point favorites total, ranging from 229.5 to 231.5. This Atlanta team does scare me a lot as a Bucks fan. Atlanta did just go into Milwaukee when the Bucks were on a 7-game winning streak, getting a lot of market support. Bucks were 4.5 point home favorites last week. And Atlanta really dominated that game from start to finish. 15-point comprehensive win on the road, 119 to 104. And you mentioned all those pieces for Atlanta, Chris, and we don't even count Zachary Sachet, the number 1 overall pick, who's just been totally hit or miss some nights. He gave him nothing, couldn't even stay on the floor 20 minutes last night in the Hawks and Knicks Cup quarterfinal game. So that's a pretty good sign when you have a guy who's still inconsistent, learning how to play consistently at a night-to-night level like a Reece Sachet, but there are other guys you can lean on. That is really positive. I really like the under and you mentioned how the defensive metrics can tend to be thrown out in these spots. For example, Hawks, worst team on the season defending the 3. Yeah. Dead last, but they have been improving over the last 10 or so games. They're about middle of the pack, and we saw how well and how much more emphasis and effort they gave into closing out on the Knicks 3-point shooters. Like, that wasn't necessarily a complete fluke that the Knicks, who had been the best offense in the NBA for the better part of 3 weeks to a month, were just ice cold and really never found their rhythm from beyond the arc, shooting at a 26% clip. So I do like under from that perspective. The best number you can find right now, I played at 231.5 for the Hawks and the Bucks. Also keep in mind that on a neutral floor too, in a playoff-like atmosphere, you have the veteran team, Milwaukee, who's been here before. They want to play slower, been a bottom 10 pace team for the past 10 games or so. They'll try to make adjustments after Atlanta went into their building and put up 119 in a win. So definitely feel like there will be some adjustments made by Milwaukee. Will it be enough for them to win the game? I'm not sure, but either way, a game played out in the low hundreds is more what I see. And the market is starting to reflect that. I certainly see this closing here way sub 230 as the market starts to take form.
Yeah, it's an interesting total because I did think that it would be a little lower when it opened, just based off of what we saw the last 2 nights, right? But I agree with everything you said. I think it might be a good angle to support or look for wagers on Atlanta team total under, but then I'm still going to probably support Atlanta plus 3.5. But you could certainly make the argument that now at this point, neutral court, right? So there's no home court advantage, and Milwaukee has had experience on this court last year, kind of, short-term memory. They want to get back what they lost. This benefits Milwaukee, and now maybe the market, after seeing Atlanta play so well, go into New York. I mean, Trae Young has done that before, but the line was 8, right? I mean, it settled at 8 last night. Completely disrespectful of Atlanta. Well, now Atlanta's facing a team that's functioning much higher than the Knicks are, at least from a chemistry standpoint. And just in my opinion, from what I see on the court, consistency wise, and they're down to 3.5, right? So it probably makes sense from a handicapper's perspective, just looking at pure numbers, to support Milwaukee here. I'm a little conflicted at that though, because I kind of trust what Atlanta is doing right now. And the length that they have and the two-way players, a lot of this league is coming down to that, right? Like, who are the teams that have guys who can compete on both ends of the floor? And if you're without even a few of those guys, either in your rotation or in your starting lineup, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. And Milwaukee always kind of underperforms early in the season, but both defenses should be there. I just think Atlanta's kind of comfortable against the Bucks right now, and that scares me for the Bucks.
I feel the same exact nervousness as well. I'll be on. Unfortunately, I won't be at the game Saturday. I'm not going to be in Vegas. I'll be on the air while that game starts. So trust me, Chris, I'll be a nervous man come Saturday. But I'll be on Bucks and Hawks under 231.5. Still the best number you can find there in the market. Hawks 6-1 this year against the Celtics, Bucks, Knicks, and Cavs. 8-11 against everybody else. It bleeds right into what you were saying to start the show, Chris. Like, some of these things just don't make any sense, but at least the Hawks are going to get up for a game like this. How about the other semi? I really wanted, after seeing the way OKC just dismantled Dallas at home in the first of the quarterfinals, we watched that along with the Milwaukee game on Tuesday night, and seeing how Houston offensively really struggled to show consistency. I thought they'd be the right side, and they needed that gift at the end to come back and snap and snap. I guess Golden State really was the team who snapped defeat from the jaws of victory. The way that game played out late. But I still have so much respect for Ime Udoka, what the Rockets are doing defensively, that it was a stay away for me. What do you make the number here where we're seeing Thunder 5-point favorites, 213.5 the total, with some early money, not surprisingly, coming into the under?
Yeah, I certainly agree with the number where it is. You can make an argument that that should be even lower. But I do think in these NBA Cup games, you do have to think about end of game situations too. Maybe a lot of fouls at the end, more than usual, right? Teams wanting to hang around and um, see if they can win the game, obviously, because it matters more. Because it's similar to a playoff feel. I'll say this: I'm a little biased. I was just checking my phone because I wanted to make sure that I had the right number here. But I have a plus 700 on the Rockets to win this thing, because the Rockets can be profile as one of those teams, right? Like maybe not necessarily elite when it comes to April, May, June. I don't even know if they're going to get to May or June. But in these situations where they can rise to the occasion, they just did something exceptional that they haven't done before since 2000, or excuse me, 2020, which is beat the Warriors. So they're off the schneid as far as that goes, and they beat the Thunder once already, right? So. And, that was the last game they played, 119 to 116. Now, that was a higher scoring game. Houston kind of found their rhythm, which is uncommon for this team, right? Like it's tough to say that a team is really good, but at the same time, their weakness or vulnerability is their offense. And, a guy like Jalen Green is inconsistent. They just have a lot of inconsistency, and OKC is not inconsistent. They've been consistent since the start of the season. They're still missing that depth, and they're missing the rim protection with Chet Holmgren. So there is some chinks in the armor as far as defense goes. We've seen that a little bit with OKC, and I think that's how Houston can control this game. They're just going to be the more physical team, slow them down. But if OKC gets on a run, the problem here is Houston is not going to be able to catch up with the Thunder if OKC goes on a run. So really it's just like watching the game live. I would rather approach this live and hope that Houston gets an early lead. So I kind of have that in my back pocket, and then I could support OKC at a much better number. I think 5 is very fair. I don't really have a big issue where that stands. So I'll be looking at this for a live betting opportunity, hoping that Houston wins.
I'll just be rooting alongside your Houston future ticket there. Find it a fascinating game, though, one I will stay away from. Before we get to your best bets, we also have a bunch of games on Friday. We don't want to neglect those. And Chris, you've got a couple best bets. As far as looking ahead, because our next episode will be after the NBA Cup Finals, which is then Tuesday, is there a particular matchup that just for, we always as a bettor, right? We do this in our heads. We're like, man, I'd love to see Team A play Team B just from a betting angle, and I'd feel like there'd be an edge. Is there a matchup that you feel like you'd be most likely to bet were it to be the case based on an edge or a matchup one way or another?
Are we talking about Friday?
I'm just talking for Tuesday. Just looking ahead to the Cup final. Like if it's Thunder, I would say for me, if it's Thunder Bucks, I would feel like that's a really difficult matchup for Milwaukee with the way OKC profiles against them. Like that would probably be a bet on for me on the Thunder. That's probably the one that jumps out to me. Not sure if there's anything others off the top of your head. We obviously aren't going to have numbers on these until the semifinal games are played.
Yeah, I think the Thunder is going to be a great bet if they face Milwaukee, because they'll get a fair number there, right? If they face the Hawks, I might be tempted to consider the Hawks, because I do think that they match up pretty well. Again, I love Trae Young handling the ball, and even when he screws up, like he's very good mentally in these situations. He doesn't typically have a bad 4 quarters, especially in these high pressure moments. Now, of course, he's facing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a group that has been as potent as any team in the NBA. But I think we could get a line similar to what we got last night on the Hawks, towards 10. And if that's the case, I'm probably going to be looking at the Atlanta Hawks to support them. But if OKC faces the Bucks, I think I would have to go with OKC. I agree with you. I think they match up very well against the Bucks. If Houston's in there, then I'm just going to hedge. I'm just going to hedge against Houston in that situation. But I do think that Milwaukee has the better matchup there. Giannis just in general is indefensible in certain situations, and we've seen him take advantage of that, even against a great team like the Houston Rockets in the way that they play defense. So, from a spread perspective, I think we should all hope for OKC versus Milwaukee, who are the two favorites, because I think it would be great to support OKC in that instance. But if the Hawks or Houston gets in there, Ben, it's going to be interesting.
I'm already mentally prepared for the Thunder to just rip my heart out as a Bucks fan once we get to that final. If it were to be Rockets Bucks, the two teams did play. It was a 1-point game. Bucks won against Houston a few weeks ago, so we at least have a data point there. Needless to say, though, pumped for the NBA Cup action this weekend. As far as the other games, because the way this worked out, NBA only scheduled 80 games for these teams before the season, and now what they've done is all the non-Cup quarterfinal qualifiers have these two other games scheduled. So sort of odd from that perspective, Chris, but you've got a couple teams that you believe are a little bit light here and should be getting more of a hefty number for the Friday card.
Yeah, this Friday card is interesting. And now, again, I'm going to repeat to the audience, December hasn't been my best month. Okay, so I might be firing on two teams a little early here, but I think the matchup and the spot make perfect sense. Obviously, most of these teams have had 5 days off leading into this, so everybody has a lot of rest. But I'm going to look at Denver and Phoenix. I'll talk about Denver first. Who, Denver's at home. They had a weird weekend losing to the Wizards. Jamal Murray hasn't been in, but it looks like he is going to play. He did practice at least partially yesterday, I believe was the report, or maybe that was today. But he's trending in the right direction. They can't keep him out, for too long. Russell Westbrook has actually played really well in his stead. But this is a Nuggets team who should be as healthy as they've been all season heading into this. And I'm so impressed by what the Clippers have done. I mean, Norman Powell, Ivan Zubac, they've been picking up for the slack of the others offensively, of course, along with James Harden, and they've been playing some really, really great defense. But Denver at home, off all this rest and completely healthy, and we're still getting a fairly humble line at 6.5, in my opinion. Without Kawhi, I think the lack of offense is going to catch up to the Clippers. I think 5 days of planning for Ty Lue is going to mean that the Clippers are going to be in this game early. So if you want to hedge this, I think a first half bet on the Clippers is not a bad look. Full game, I think Denver wins this by 10. So
especially I'd say, Chris, when you get Denver in a position where they're plenty rested, plenty of time to prepare. With how limited of a bench they have, with how much they've been putting on the weight of Nikola Jokic's shoulders, that's always going to be a team I'd be looking to bet on when they've been in a nice kind of ease in, back home for a while, fresh legs, fully rested sort of spot, and that's exactly what you're getting in that Clipper game.
100%. And it's a really good matchup for Denver, too, because as much as their bench has been struggling, so has the Clippers. And the Clippers have a few injuries. Terrence Mann should be out of this one still, and there's another guy that I can't think of. But but their depth is starting to subside as well. So that shouldn't affect Denver as much at home. Plus, Russell Westbrook, if we see Jamal Murray, then he's going to go back to that second unit, and he's been playing really well. Suns and Jazz. I'm going to say your Suns, Ben, because we started off this season feeling great about these
Suns.
What a
disappointment. Jeez.
But it's kind of the same old story, right? Like if they have one injury or especially two injuries to their three stars, and even if they all play, they're too reliant on their jump shots. I mean, they don't get to the rim enough, and they're not shooting threes that well enough yet most of the time to overcome some of these setbacks. Now, Kevin Durant should be back on Friday. They said 90% participation in practice. That sounds like, to me, he practiced. And this is obviously a great spot. It's the easiest defense you're going to face in a long time. They just got done with Orlando, Miami, San Antonio recently. 4 straight losses. The Suns know that it's time to turn this thing around, and I don't think they can do it without Kevin Durant. So they should get Durant back on Friday. Again, another humble line. I got it at 4.5. I think it might have even been shorter before that. I wanted to check on a few things, but I think Phoenix steps up. I know the Jazz are like crazily unpredictable, but for the most part, this is a bad team who doesn't play defense, and they really lack chemistry on offense most of the time too. Like they're not going to put up 140 on Friday. At least I don't think so, Ben. So I'm going even though they're on the road.
Phoenix, looking at the updated projections, on pace for 42.8 wins. I've got over 47.5. And with each passing day, with each passing game where they're banged up, and as you mentioned, way too reliant on these central stars and the shooting from outside, been a huge disappointment this year for Phoenix. I'm I'm losing confidence in my bet cashing over, especially now when you got stars who are banged up. You're much more likely to see them kind of pick their spots to try to give it a full go. So again, kind of like with Denver, a good situation when you've had some rest and you are now getting a central star like a Kevin Durant
Yeah.
back in that matchup there. So we'll lay 6.5 with Denver at home against the LA Clippers. Lay 4.5 with the Phoenix Suns on the road against the Utah Jazz. I like it, along with Hawks and Bucks under 231.5. That is the first semifinal Saturday in the NBA Cup. I realize probably not as many situational angles since all these teams that are playing over the weekend are rested here, Chris. But anything else before we wrap that is jumping out as far as any sort of back-to-backs or weird, tricky spots for these non-NBA Cup teams playing over the weekend?
Yeah, I don't have as many look aheads. I would say if Phoenix craps the bed on Friday, then they face the Trailblazers at home on Sunday. So, maybe that's a bounce back spot. I would not bet on the Lakers right now. LeBron James, something's going on with his, I don't know, ankle or whatever. But they're just a mess right now. I wouldn't touch them. Um, mm, yeah, I guess I don't have many other thoughts. I mean, the Grizzlies at LA on Sunday. I need to look at the Grizzlies schedule, but if it's not a too tiring of a spot, the Grizzlies across the board are just. I know I said it last week. They quoted me when they tweeted it out, which I don't think is a great quote actually. I think I said the Grizzlies are doing a lot of things right, but I said right like 5 times in one sentence. Anyway, they are though, and
They are. They get
and
Brooklyn at home on Friday as well, so that should be a spot
yes,
against
yeah,
a struggling
right,
defense at Memphis. And Memphis has been just a dynamite home team.
yeah.
Figure that would be a good situation as well. Lakers will be coming home after playing Minnesota on Friday night, and Lakers are a big road dog there.
I did want to say quickly, Ben, in support of your Suns. If my memory serves me correctly, I did not look this up, and maybe I'm completely wrong. I think the Suns went on a crazy run last January, February, if I remember correctly, like that. And that is a team that
Yeah.
can do that, right? Like that. Once they're healthy, for God's sake, they can win 15 games in a row. So, it's not over yet, Ben. Your future is alive and well as long as Kevin Durant is alive and well.
They got the 49 wins last year. Yeah, they were 19-18, got blown out at the Clippers January 8th, and then reeled off 7 straight and 9 of 11. And that was the stretch mid January. So we just got to get to January all in one piece, and we got a puncher's chance on that. At least that's my hope on the Phoenix bet to the over on the win total. Regardless, this is going to be an awesome weekend for NBA action with the Cup going on. The doubleheader in Vegas. I'm glad that they moved this. It was, I think, a Tuesday or a Wednesday last year. It was a really weird vibe. Like the arena was half full when I went to the Bucks Pacers game. It was like 2 p.m. in the afternoon on a weekday. So I think the NBA kind of figured out, hey, we need this stuff. Let's make it single windows, prime time on the weekends, and then we'll make the championship game a Tuesday night in prime time. I do like that. I think we're going to have awesome crowds. I wish I was there. Wish I was in Vegas to see you, but congrats picking up your check here over the weekend, Chris, and can't wait to see how it all breaks down over the next few days.
Yeah, someday Lou Finocchiaro is going to be there, who I'm on the NFL show with on the same network. He's going to be there the following weekend. So I'm missing everybody, but we will catch each other soon. And now, I don't know what I was thinking. There's a lot going on, Ben. But I'll be in Vegas for when these NBA Cup games are happening on Saturday. So me and the old wife might have to scalp some tickets. We'll see.
You should go. I mean, you got a nice little payday, so I feel like they're funds are.
I guess
ample.
I could afford it.
Yeah, splurge a little bit. For Chris Farley, for our outstanding producer Sam Hart, doing a great job behind the scenes as well. I'm Ben Wilson saying so long. We will catch you next week here on the NBA show from Clubhouse TV. Best of luck with all your bets. Enjoy the NBA Cup over the weekend as we say so long.